Pulled from my bike for a second gear overhaul. I left pretty much all the hoses and boots on, as you can see. Brought it down to the heated shop and just finally going to take it apart now and do an investigation as to what all is bad, what needs to be replaced. Thought I would record it since there's plenty of how-tos but no video of this as of yet. I'm aware of. You notice mine's a California bike. I have the California Emission stuff right here. I'm going to take that off first. So that's the only difference that should be of note to you guys. Minor difference between 96 and 97 plus won't be relevant in this teardown or in reassembly. I ran over with it pretty quick with simple green, blew off anything loose. There's still plenty of grunge over on the front sprocket side. Clean up individual parts as I go. But a good idea to try and get most of the loose stuff off before you open things up. Spark plugs, of course, in there, and blow that out. Even though you are taking all the way apart, you could clean everything, but why make more work than you need to? So as of right now, I'm going to try and take out this California stuff, and we'll see how it goes. This is a 14mm mount on each side, plus this hard piping going into the exhaust jacket here, which is hose clamps, warm drive hose clamps, with some type of an O-ring in there for sealing. Never had these off before. So hopefully it'll just slide off and I can reuse them, and we'll see how that goes. I could pull all this off. Some people like to get rid of the California, sometimes people ask about it. There's really not that much stuff. There's this plus a charcoal canister up on the back side, which you can't see at the moment. And, you know, I could eliminate a lot of hose routing, but I figure I might as well put it back the way it was. So with that, there's a nut on the back side of these main mount bolts. They're 14mm. Have to get a ratchet back in there. It's tough to see, but this is the outside pipe. Here's a mount. Goes through, nut on the back side. Very good and hard and tricky to get a wrench in there for the California stuff. Got the left and right brackets off. These nuts here. It is a 6mm if you want to do that, or Phillips. I'll do these warm drive clamps across the way, and there's 4 of them. And then in theory I should be able to wiggle off the California stuff. Seems to have missed one bracket over here. Pretty obvious. It's a 10mm going to the front of the block. The oil cooler crossover line. This hard line here, upper banjo, lower banjo, down by the little filter. It's the only way of pulling these off. As far as these actual clamps go, I didn't need to undo them because the stab, the the right angle bands in the hard line just plugged into the block there by the exhaust ports. And they just wiggled right on out. Not entirely sure if there's a gasket in there or not. An O-ring rather, we'll see. Or if it's just a press fit. I'll take a look later. There's a bracket holding the hard line to the block. It's a 5mm cap head screw. Okay, oil hard line removed. Mindful of the banjo bolts, and there's 2 copper crush washers, one for above and one for below. There's 2 of them. Sometimes they'll stick on the block, sometimes they'll come out. And just be aware that you keep them. You should replace them technically. I myself and a lot of other people have reused copper crush washers a lot, but technically replace them. There's a hose leading from the emissions back to the motor. Whenever separating a hose, piece of tape on each side, mark it so they're the same, so you know that this number 1 and this number 1 go back together here. Now the main part of the emissions is free. There's a little canister here. It's just an exhaust gas for circulatory system. Charcoal canister still mounted to the motor. I'll take that off a little later. You'll see it then. But this is primarily what the California system is. If people want to take it off, savings is a couple pounds, which on a race bike I'm sure matters. Haven't decided if I'll put it back on yet or not. Most likely I will, because I just like putting things back the way they were. Next I'm going to take off the oil cooler. This is a lower radiator bracket, 2 bolts going to the block from underneath. Probably have to get in there with a ratcheting box wrench, or a box wrench socket might be tight. Take that bracket off. And this rubber hose here is the cooler part of the cooler. Coolant comes through the main hard lines in the back, through here. Gonna disconnect the rubber hose up on the upper side. And take this hose and this as one. Actually, I gotta spin up my oil filter still. Already drained my oil, but there will be some in there to collect. Most of the oil should stay in the filter, but we're going to lose some here. Let it drain out. Should have done this pre-removal, but I wanted to try and keep it sealed up because I was transporting it in the back of the SUV. and I didn't want to have too much dripping out, so I plugged up all the holes I opened up. Well, that's it. That's a big nut right there. I didn't bring my biggest sockets with me. I hope it's under 32. We'll find out. I'm going to guess 30. And it is a 30, so big nut here is 30 millimeters. So that means anything on this bike, 32 mil is the biggest socket you're going to need. I'm not even sure if you use a 32, but standard large socket set usually goes from 10 to 32. So if you have that, you should be fine. I have an electric impact, but I'm just trying to use all hand tools here like somebody else would do if they were doing it. So I give it a couple taps with the hammer while taking it off. And this long thread here. Imagine there's a gasket on the back side or some type of a seal. There's a rubber seal, big old O-ring. Should be reusable. And more oil leaking. More oil left in here than I thought, which is always the case, isn't it? Get that out of the way. And up there, up that drain. This is a specialized bolt. You can see all the holes. This is the 30 mil here. Back this off. Oil passages through here. Let me get the rubber hose off and then I'll bring it up to the camera. Alright. A little cooler with the hose. There's the plant. O-ring here. Comes in there. Front outlet pipe. All you ever wanted to know about an oil cooler and more right there. Good idea to put your parts in bags and associate bolts with them in the bag. You can label it if you want. You don't think you'll remember, but keep oily things oily within themselves. Less chance of other things getting contaminated. So 1-gallon bags work good for larger parts and smaller bags for smaller parts. Simple as that. I'll take off this bracket here. It's 10 millimeter. With the oil pump gone, oil cooler, excuse me. Got better access to get it with a ratchet, which is nice. These bracket bolts are actually long enough they hold the two case tabs together, it would appear. Now that bracket's out, I'll zoom in here and I can show you where your coolant drain screws are. One right here on the outside, and one on the opposite side, right here. So if you're draining your coolant, you loosen those two, plus there's a drain over on the water pump side. And then you can drain your whole water jacket that way, or as opposed to just pulling the hose off and you'll get most of it out that way through the radiator as well. Just another method of doing things. Now I'm going to take the spark plugs out of the top of the head and then we'll pull the valve cover and we'll look at the valves and how the cams go and then work our way. I think we'll pull the head off next. Try and make this thing a little lighter to work with. Okay, plugs are in a baggie. Put them aside. Okay, manual wants you to crack these loose, quarter turn a piece, crisscross pattern. I don't even have a ratchet right now. Ah, there you go. So you can work your way in to out. Probably want to do this one, 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 this one. These have already been loose because I've had the valve cover off before, so I'm just going to zip them off real quick. Little handheld here. These are all 10 millimeter bolts, by the way, and I bagged and tagged them. If you look here on the end caps, this bit of rubber is part of the valve cover gasket this thick. So what you're going to want to do is take your plastic hammer, rubber mallet, whatever, give a couple gentle taps, work your way around the valve cover over and over and over. Technically, if it's getting stuck and not coming off, you could maybe get a little pick or screwdriver under there, but you're risking quite a bit. But most people have no problem getting this off as one piece and reusing this valve cover gasket. It is pretty thick, pretty heavy duty. I'll show you once I get it off. I've had my valve cover off before, so it's already good and loose. You can see there's the cover with the end cap seals there. Here's the valve train, cam gears, timing chain. get you some more in-depth stuff there. Once I get them, I'll show you top dead center on these valves when you're doing a valve adjustment. Go to the back here. I still have to loosen. This is the cam timing chain tensioner. Loosen this bolt off. Might have to take the whole assembly off. I'm trying to take off as little as possible to get the motor apart. So I don't think the assembly actually has to come all the way off. I think the tensioner bolt and spring would have to come out. And that gives you play in the cam chain here, and you take this cover off, and you get the play you need to lift up the cam chain and then slide your cams out so you can do it without breaking the cam chain. You can, grind off a link, push the pin through, and then you're going to need a new master link for your timing chain and then chain riveting tool to do it. Might save you some hassle, might not, depends on however you want to do it. More in-depth stuff to follow. Okay, this is the timing mark. There is a T here. Goes bottom, top that way, and then a mark here. The divide in the case is the alignment point here. This is the bottom of the upper half. This line here lines up with this. This is in relation to the number 1 cylinder. This is the number 1 cylinder. If you look at the valves here right now, this is not at top dead center for the number 1 cylinder because the cam lobes are pointing at each other. It's going this way, and this one's going this way. You can see that, and that exhaust intake in. Your wrench, even though it's lined up here, it's not necessarily lined up there. Rotate it counterclockwise. Go around again. You can see the valves are moving. Now we see that they are coming around to be opposite to each other. You see the lobes sticking out that way, sticking out that way. Look at the timing mark down here. That's lined up. These are opposite. This is top dead center compression stroke. Maybe I can get a light down there and we can see something a little better. This is going to be about impossible to see on camera, but you can see the top of the piston is at the top of the motor right now. And down through the spark plug hole is what we're looking at. So we know it's that way. Not totally relevant for disassembly, but gives you a better idea. And then there's also some timing marks on the cams. There's a dot here. Indent on the cam here. Dot here. Indent on the cam here. Dot here. Those would line up with each other. So you'd line this up and this up and this up and this up and this up. So even though this can be lined up in 2 different spots, these will only be lined up at 1 different spot with the lobes opposite of each other. So if you get all that together, you can't time it wrong. It's not as scary as people might make it believe. Certainly a crucial thing, but dot to dot, dot to dot, line to line, and you should be good. Cam tensioner bolt. Oh, I'm totally out of sync here. Right here. It's 12mm. Sometimes they can be good and stuck, so you might have to give it a couple love taps with the hammer, but it's a normal bolt, so counterclockwise will loosen it. Give it a go. Impact tool would be helpful. Okay, I ended up taking out the whole timing tensioner assembly. It's just a little easier. Maybe a little overview of what it looks like. This is the main cap bolt. You notice it's hollow, so it's a special bolt. It threads onto the spring here and puts pressure on it. This has teeth down here, so it can go out, but it can't go back in unless you push this little release. So that's how you would reset the tension and be taking this off. If you got a lot of valve noise, sometimes it's just the timing chain slapping around because the spring isn't strong enough. Push this plunger in there. This could be stuck on its position, so you take this off, clean it, reassemble it, try it again, see how it would go. Gasket did rip on me when we got it out. Replaced gaskets anyways, so remember you're going to need one of those. And it's kind of an interesting little simple deal that does a job. Gonna bag it, keep the bolts together, put it away. Should note there is an up on it. It's printed on here. It says up. That would be up. Remember to put it back the way you took it. It's held on either side by 5mm cap head bolts. Timing chain cap off, 4 bolts, 8mm, loosen slightly, crisscross pattern, then take it off all the way. Okay, chain guide is off. You'll notice now we have slack in the chain that we can able to, once we loosen these cams out, we can pull the cam out, and then this will be free to drop through the head. You should wire it up there in case you drop it. You need to get it out again, but we are taking everything apart, so if you do drop it without having a wire on it, you'll be able to fish it through again, but might as well put it on there just because. Manual specs to remove cam cap screws from outside to inside crisscross, so you could start here, and then here, and here, and then 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 here, 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 here. Do it a quarter turn at a time till they're all good and loose, so you keep the load as even as possible distributed on the cam. I'm going to do one cam at a time, and then I'm actually going to end up, I'm going to put the caps back on to retain the bolts, but I will leave the cams out, I think. Haven't decided. If you leave the cams in, some valves are going to be in the open position on the head. Might interfere how you're going to store it. We'll see how that goes. But do one at a time, get the cams out of here, and then we can crack loose the head bolts and take the head off. As you're doing this, it's kind of a tedious process, back and forth a lot. Make sure it's even. You'll see these cam caps start coming up higher and higher. Every turn you'll see the tension. You'll know when they're all loose enough when you can spin every head, you know, with ease without binding. And you'll see the cap has stopped coming up with each turn. It's the pressure of the springs pushing up against the valves, pushing against the buckets, pushing against the cam lobes, putting tension on this. That's why you got to do it evenly, so you don't try and warp the cam with the spring tension underneath it. Once they're all loose, you can spin them all off, take these caps off, and then we'll slide the cam out. Okay, get the caps off. We're going to try and pull the intake cam off. There are dowel pins here at the bottom to index the cap, so don't lose them, don't let them drop. You might want to pull them off, put them in the bag with it. There's only one big hole. I'm sorry, there's three. I don't know why I wasn't paying attention. There's three dowel pins here to be aware of, so you put your caps on the correct way. So now we're going to try and remove this cam gently. There we go. Cam is lifted up. Grab it on the non-machined part just for safety's sake. Slide cam out from under the chain. Got one camshaft, intake camshaft, free. This can only fit in one way. Well, I shouldn't say that. You should be aware it only fits one way because this end here with the timing mark on it has this ring piece here. The other side does not. So you should know it should go towards the timing part to line up. And they are different, the intake and exhaust, but you might want to mark them yourself just so you know that they are different, you know which one's which. You could set it back on here as well if you wanted. And you shouldn't really tighten anything down because it will just try and rest and cause issues. But it might be worth the effort to put these back on loosely, just to keep everything held together. Certainly don't tighten them so you're not putting any pressure on the valves. Keep everything in the neutral position, but just couple threads so you don't lose the bolts. And you don't lose the any of the buckets, shims. Because with the cam out, even with it loose, these shims underneath where you would adjust. I'll show you when I pull the next cam out. I'll get some more close-ups and go more into that. Okay, one more cap to take off. Everything's loosened up. Just give it a little wiggle, and it'll come right off. Be mindful of the dowels. 3 again. And then I'm going to put it there. Timing chain I'm going to wire up here so we don't lose it in the mix. And then we'll slide this cam off. Let me grab some wire here and then we'll get some close-ups after I pull this cam out of the buckets, the shim. Here we go. The cam is out. It's on that paper towel over there on my plastic board. I was going to show you better. These are the buckets right here, these metal components here. One I've taken off. This is the top of the valve with the spring and the spring retainer. This is a removed bucket right here. It's empty here, hollow here. Top there, and we'll just slide over there. If a magnet is nice, or electrical tape covered screwdriver is what I used. Just give it a little leverage to get them out, and that's how you would change them. You have to take the cams off if you're going to do any valve adjustment, if you find that in your valve adjustment. So the same concept with the chain, loosen the tensioner and all that good stuff. I put a piece of speaker wire on there just because that's rubber coated wire, but again it's really not going to matter. And then I'm going to put the other, I just put this on here, this is all super loose. It's not actually tight, just to hold the cam from falling out and the buckets from falling out. I'm going to put the other ones back on, put that cam back on top of this as well. And we'll slide this down in there. So it's not in the way of when I put the cam back on with the gear. And that way everything stays where it needs to stay. And then we got to loosen the cylinder head bolts. Oh, my mistake, there's some in here we'll have to get to, so I got to pull that cam back off. Get all the bolts out first before I put the cams back in to hold it. My mistake. First time I've had this motor apart. So down in these holes are bolts. And they're nuts rather for the end of the studs. So we're going to pull these off. So I got to take that cam back out. No big deal. And we'll get all the bolts out. There's still some dowels, retainer, and they're on the rod, so it's not just going to fall off either way. So give that a go. I'll take care of that, and then we'll record again from there. I'll show you a camshaft inspection. Certainly not an expert. There's oil on here and wipe that off. You're going to look for any burn marks or scoring. These look pretty shiny. I think in my mind I'm calling these perfectly acceptable to reuse. The nuts are 6mm Allen cap screws, and there is a specific sequence for loosening them. Your service manual will know for sure, but I can give it to you in the brief. Okay, so we have, looking at my mom, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 below it, 8, and then down to 9, 10, 11, 12. And do it in that order and a half a turn at a time until all are loose, and then run them off the rods, and then we'll wiggle woggle the head loose. Holy shit, ladies and gentlemen, holy shit, that took a little while longer than expected. These are what the nuts look like, and they are 6mm, what have you there. I am using, this is a Stanley set, 3/8 drive. I bought these at Walmart years ago. It's only $8 for the set of the metrics, and has every size you'll need for your bike. Also got long ball end ones, but one number 9 nut rounded out on me and stripped. And I was trying a whole bunch of different tools. Ultimately, I dismantled one of my ball ends just to give me some hex stock. And I was able to, because it was longer, this has a taper to it, so it couldn't go in as deep. These ones are longer, and I was able to hammer it way in there and find some decent hex on it still. But there was a ball end on it, and I couldn't even get a socket over there, so that broke off right away. But then I was able to put a regular socket on there, like this. And then I needed to have somebody help me. My dad came out and held the motor. And then with the 3/8 drive, plus pipe, him holding it, me holding it, it cracked loose, and thank God it came off, because otherwise I'd have to drill that shit out. That would have been a pain in the ass. So always be very careful of these things rounding out. And so I gotta buy 2 new ones, I think. Another one's kind of chewed up. The others came out real easy. Just 2 gave an issue to it. So bolts are out. I'm gonna put the cams back on and finger tight that thing, just a couple threads to hold the buckets in place. I had to grab a magnet for something else. I was just going to show you how easy this is with a magnet. It just comes right off, and much easier to go back on with a magnet. So now you'll take your dead blow, rubber hammer, whatever, and give it a couple whacks. I left my mounting bolts in, but a couple whacks on each side. I already did this, and that'll break the head gasket loose. And then you can lift the head off, but I'm going to bolt the cams on first. Chain in there. And then I'm going to lift the head off and put it back on the tripod, and you can see me lift like that. Alright. Chain guide, get that out of the way. I'll get this out of the way. And move that off tripod for you in a second. Alright. There is the pistons. See, it was at the top, as we expected. Chain guide stays that half still. And there you go. Here is the head. Here are the valves. And as to be expected on a 40,000 mile motor. Pretty black. I'll clean it up a little, I suppose. Got to be careful you don't use something that's caustic. It'll eat aluminum. Your safest probably even just trying to clean it with diesel, kerosene, gasoline, something that you know could go in there and burn anyways, you know would be safe to clean it with. Somebody not too long ago dipped their pistons in something not reading that it was bad for aluminum, and they had to buy 4 new pistons. Well, there would be where the plug would stick through. And there you go, 4 valves per cylinder, 16 valve, double overhead cam. See how I put these back in here, but they're just finger tight. Not binding anything, just keeping everything together. And this guide can come out, or you can leave it, what have you. I'm gonna bag this up, wrap it in plastic rather, and then put it under the workbench for storage. But you can see I left the, move this out of the way. Here we go. I left the thermostatic valve. Excuse me. Having a hard time. The thermostat housing's in there, plus the pyrometer and the fan on-off switch is this thing here. pyrometer is this thing here. It sends a signal to the temperature gauge to display, and I just left the hose on. Certainly could take it off, be less in the way, whatever, but might end up doing it. We'll see how it sits on the table. But for now, I'm just going to bag it and get out of the way, and then we'll take the cylinders off, and I'll record that, and they should just slide off from this point. A couple taps with the hammer, and they should come off. I need to disconnect these hard water pipes from the water pump, and I'm going to undo it just at this union here and at the bottom union there. I'm going to leave this rail on. Looks like it should just stay with the jugs. Again, I could take it off. I'm just going to try it without it. And then I'll make this assembly a lot lighter, easier to work with, and I'll pull off the clutch and all that stuff, get it prepped for splitting cases. Alright, I have been working on this water pipe here. Been taking my dead blow, mallet, what have you, and doing very gently working it and trying to get behind the tabs to get it wiggle loose. And I think I'm just about free. I'm going to finish it the last couple inches with my hand. It's much more bound up on the bottom than the top. The top came out, bottom came out. O-rings on here. If they don't tear and they're not chipped up, you should be able to reuse them without issues. Nipple part goes on the top. I do generally think it can fit only the one way. It's only one way it makes sense. So you shouldn't have to worry about labeling that too much. So that's how you get rid of this. Alright. Now for the cylinders themselves. You just have to go around and give it some slight taps with your mallet. Work your way around and you should be okay. We will try it. Do this in real time and see what happens. Looks like it's working alright. Get under it now. It's free. Pistons fell. Two of them anyways. Gotta get this the rest of the way. There are dowel pins in relation to the head that was taken off, dowel pin in the corners. And there you go. So be mindful of them when you're taking this off. There's going to be resistance from pistons trying to make their way out the bottom. Don't want to bind it up too much. And just slide out. There's a dowel pin I'm missing in the corner. I'm guessing it's still in the head. Didn't notice it first time around. I'll take a look for it. But this is the cylinders here. And I'm dripping coolant and oil here mixed together. Lovely. I'm going to put it on the table. Okay, here are the pistons. Loose motor. That's a little extra light down here if I can. You know, normal wear and tear. We'll see how they clean up. You will want to mark your pistons when you take them off so you can put them in the right place. It should be, you might want to add the arrow too. There should be one in there somewhere. Or know what side you took the circlip off to get that wrist pin out so you can take the pistons off. But, you know, just scratch a number 1 and a number 2, 3, 4, which is the same order as it is would be in the manual. This would be number 1. And go down the line. As long as you know what they are, should be fine. Then you might want to put an arrow pointing that way towards the stator, just so you know which way they go. And that should be okay. They look alright. The rings are there. Nothing's broken. I mean, not a whole lot to tell, honestly, by me. I'm no pro as far as visual inspection goes. Looking at these bores, about impossible to tell camera-wise. I don't see any burn marks. I see cross-hatching. You know, shiny scratch mark swirls on there. But no nicks or missings of things. I'm feeling pretty confident as of right now of reusing these rings. And you cannot actually, hone out these because of the liners in there. I forget what the liners are made out of. You can take like a really fine emery cloth, clean them up a little bit. There is a special hone for it, I believe, but it's not a traditional hone like you would have normally or rent, so don't do that. If you can see, my case is broken here. I had JB weld patch on there. I took that off. I'm going to try and fix that more permanent with some, I think it's HTS 2000 I picked up a while back. But I don't think I'm going to deal with that till I get the cases in half and deal with it from there. Got to take the starter motor off. This is the charcoal canister. They're part of the emission system. That's bracketed shared with the clutch cover, so I'm not going to do that. until I get to that. So I'll probably take the starter motor off and then pull the starter clutch and gear assembly as well, and then work on these pistons, get these removed, marked, what have you, so they can be pulled out. It's stupid, but they won't clear, so you gotta take them off. You can't reuse the clips, buy new clips. These two bolts here, 21, 22, are the stupid bolts that make you have to take the whole top end apart in order to split the case. Right there. There was a better way around it. You wouldn't have to take this off to split it. But you'd have probably a really awkward thing to work with. You want to look here for any stretched threads. You just want to make sure the spacing's all more or less even. It's leftover gasket, don't worry about that. If they were pinched or stretched, what have you, you'd want to replace these studs. And looking at it, I am now even more thankful I was able to get that one nut off, because it would have been a pain. I mean, I would have had to just drill all the way through the stud, I suppose, and then replace it, which would not be fun. There's dowel pins here for indexing your gasket, here and here. And just be aware of them. And then there should be some oil squirters, which would be these here and here. They're held in with just an O-ring. You could pull them out. They might fall out on their own, so it's probably best to remove them yourself. I don't know. Haven't decided what I'm going to do about it yet. O-ring things, so if you don't tear them, you should be able to reuse it. We'll see how it goes. I did just pop one out. Seems to be alright. You just put your finger in there and give it a wiggle, and it'll come out. I'm going to bag this so I don't lose it, make sure I don't leave any O-ring behind on that. So if we look at this here, here's what an oil squirter looks like. These point down the index on that tab, be aware of that. I don't know if it matters which one's which, but I am going to number them just so I know I put them back in whatever hole they came out of, just because I'll mark them with a scratch awl or something. I took first piston off to give it a try, and now I'm going to try and show you what I did a little better here. These little clips, they're not a snap ring like I thought they were originally. I'm going to use a small pick, and that's what I did on the other one. I'm going to get underneath it through this access here and leverage the, excuse me, I want to do it so you can see it, and leverage out the snap ring. Once I get a little piece of it out like that, I take small needle nose pliers and I grab onto the snap ring like so, and then I will twist it out, working my way around the piston. And you do use new ones of these, so I suppose if you were to break one in the process, wouldn't be such a big deal. But it's nice to get things out as best we can. The first one came out a lot easier than this one. There it went, but I dropped it down in the case, so I gotta remember to try and find that later on. Good times there. And then to push the piston wrist pin out, I do it with my fingers as far as I can first, and I'll get a little bit, and then even though you're not supposed to tap them out, it's so gently, I'm not worried about it, and I think most everybody does it that way. This is an 11mm deep weld socket, and put it on the opposite side after I got it started a little bit with my finger, so I know for sure it'll fit in the recess proper, and then hold it together, and then I'm going to tap it through, and that'll push the pin through. So when I keep dropping things because this guard is in the way. Do that. And you'll want to find that pin if you drop any when you're in there. So I'll make a note of that so you remember to find it later on. There's the pin. Trying to go a little bit more. You don't have to go all the way, so it'll come off. Lift it off. I've marked these things. My rings are clear. Excuse me, let me back this out. I've marked this already, and I'm bagging them individually, and then I'm going to label the bags with the pin numbers and all that. Piston numbers, just to be doubly sure. Okay, all pistons are off right now and individually bagged. And I'm not entirely sure where I want to go next with this. I suppose it'll be the starter motor and the starter assembly. And then get into the clutch side, and we can show some of the common clutch questions people have, not related necessarily to tear down, but as far as indexing and shift kit install, things like that. I'm going to have to clean up that other side quite a bit better before I split the cases, but I'm still just trying to get everything lighter and better fitted for things like that, so give that a try. I'm not sure if I'll pull this rotors off or not. I don't know if they need to be. I've had it up before, it's not such a big deal, but why take off more than you absolutely have to, I guess. Make things lighter, I guess, would be the main point. There's a woodruff key on the stator wheel, so if you pull it off, you can't put it on wrong again. You need a puller for that. Maybe I'll do it just to show. For the record, I just used a magnet and pulled the one clip I dropped out. Came out with no problem, so I don't need to worry about anything in there still. Okay, starter motor right here. Two number 8mm bolts there. I think there's an O-ring back here, and you just kind of have to wiggle this shaft back to get it off. You may want to try prying a little. We shall see how it goes. Yep, and there she went. Here's an O-ring. Can make it bind up pretty tight once you already have the one wire disconnected. 2 bolt tabs here. Starter motor shaft. You can spline it up either way, so if this turns, whatever, don't worry about it. Starter motor removed. I'm going to remove the peanut cover, starter motor, starter clutch cover, 5mm cap head screws, do them in a crisscross pattern. If you had to service your starter clutch motor because you're trying to start it and it'll catch and go bang, which happened to me before, I put on a different one. There isn't oil behind this. I don't remember honestly if there's a gasket right now. I think there is a gasket, but it's not that crucial. So I'm saying you have no issues in taking this off if you ever need to take it off to service or replace anything. There's gears in there. The gears pretty much mesh one way. You might have to fiddle with them if you don't mark them good enough, but you'll see when you get in there. And the clutch assembly here comes off with a puller. Alright, I'm not going to remove the cover, just giving it a wiggle. Some of the gears do mount to the cover. They might come with it, they might fall off, they might stay behind, hard to say. Just slowly wiggle its way off. And then you will expose what's inside. There is a shaft in here. Spin this around. This shaft here, main bearing here, and then this shaft corresponds here, and then this has to sink in with that one. Different length screws here, you want to keep them in the right spots. Remember that this is your idle adjustment knob mounting tab, so keep that there. And so keep this together. Try and remember where things went. Generally speaking on this motorcycle, I notice anything that has a dowel pin is a long bolt. You want to cover anything that's not a dowel pin is usually a short bolt, so that'll probably keep it straight in your head, or mark them if you feel like it. These little gears just pull off. So I'm going to take some photos just to recognize them, but you can kind of see how it would really only fit one way. This is the shaft from the starter motor that turns the whole assembly. This is the starter clutch. To remove the starter clutch, use like a standard puller. Take the center nut off, pull this. I'll get to that when I get to it. Right now I'm just going to mark this stuff and go from there. Alright, I'm going to cheat on this one. I use my electric impact wrench. It's Harbor Freight impact wrench, 40 bucks on sale, 14mm impact socket. Truthfully, this doesn't put enough torque. You probably could be just fine using chrome sockets on it if you wanted to. Otherwise, you might have to come up hold this or hold her on the other side, or you might get lucky and it might just break loose. Remember to do it before you take the motor out of the bike. There she went. I turned the crank over slightly, no big deal. You can move this all you want right now. Well, not all you want because there's only so much oil on it. Also, woodruff key on here so you can't put it back on or take it off incorrectly. And now I'm going to pull it off once I get set up with my puller. Make sure you're not damaging anything. Thinking I might have to reposition this. It's getting cockeyed on me. and it slipped. Sorry you missed the action, but it came off with a typical bang. Woodruff key came off flying a little bit too, but I found it, so we got that. This is a starter clutch, and the starter clutch gear, you can separate these. It's just a one-way, fancy kind of gearing system, so I'm going to bag these. And that's off now, and that part of the motor is clear. Make sure you don't lose your Woodruff key, as they are small little half moons. You can get new ones, not too expensive, but best to keep around what you got. Now I'm going to remove my charcoal canister, which shares a bracket with the clutch cover, so I'm going to undo the clutch cover, 5mm cap bolt, and take this bracket off, and I can move the container out of the way. And then I only have one hose and one electrical still on still onto the case. Once this is out, these will come with it. Should be cleaned up a little bit better than what it was before. Alright, removing the two bolts. One's long, one's short. This one has a dowel pin in it. And this is the last of the California emissions. This is like a charcoal canister. It recirculates from the exhaust back into here to be reburned in the carburetor, and then back into the airbox to be sucked down, and then just a vent to the atmosphere here. So, not a whole lot to the Cali system. And this is, it's got to be under a pound. There's nothing to this. Okay, sorry for all the okays, starts and stops. Loosened up all the screws, bolts, cap head bolts, and I'm going to wiggle off this cover as best I can. And I might need to give it a couple love taps. I haven't had this off in a while. Oh, lost a couple. Trying to keep them all in there. That's what happens when you get greedy. And apparently I didn't loosen that one all the way. Still one thread grabbing. Okay. Cover, bolts, keep them together. Cover gasket. Usually these come off clean and can be reused, and I have reused this one a couple of times now, and I'm thinking about just buying another one at this point, but I'm really not going to. It's very nice, still in very good condition. Some people forget the gasket and do RTV around the perimeter. You can certainly do that if you want. I've had this off so many times for different shaft replacements, clutch kits, clutch adjustment, whatever. It's just been on off so many times. So this is only like my factory gasket plus two. This is the second gasket I bought, and I've had this clutch and things apart for access a dozen times or more. And that's all there is to say about that. Spend a couple moments talking about the clutch. People get into your shift kits and whatever you got to do. This is the clutch pressure plate. This is the thing that only fits one way. Some people say two. Whatever, it fits away. You gotta make sure it links up. I have a couple photos out there of this meshing and not meshing. These 6 screws hold the springs. The springs are behind them. When you put this together, you want to use a 1/4 inch drive, inch-pound torque wrench, or super light, hand tight. Very, very gingerly. Don't try a 3/8 0 to 80 range torque wrench on this thing. It just won't be accurate enough and you'll break the post. Back these off crisscross, 1/4 turn of time till the spring tension's off. 1/4 turn might be an exaggeration, a turn, whatever. Try and be even on them as you can so you don't put too much stress on the posts. Clutch plates, the fibers and the steels are in here. This is the outer clutch basket. And then there is the inner basket, which you can't see, which is behind this pressure plate. This can spin within itself. When you pull the clutch lever, the rod pushes against this top hat here, and there's a bearing, pushes the plate out, takes the tension off, and allows it to spin. This part will spin inside this part. Let go of the clutch lever, it goes back down, the springs hold the pressure, and the plates grab, and then the motor is linked to the transmission. Under here, this is the shift shaft where tabs get bent, and then the tranny gets jammed up. The detent arm, oil pump gear, drive gear, and star cam. You'll see that once I take the clutch off, and there's really not anything to be scared about doing on a clutch at all. You just take your time and go with it and follow my steps. At this point, you would need a clutch holder to hold it to get the main nut off. I'm going to use the impact. Impact, it'll spin it right off, no problem. If you have it in the bike, you can put the bike in 6th gear and hold the rear brake, which the lever will be on this side, and then you can brake that 27 mil, or it might be a 30 millimeter nut. Could even be 32, I'll tell you when I get there. You can break it off that way, or you can leave it in any gear, put a 2x4 through the back wheel if it's up on a stand, and lock the wheel that way, hold it to break it loose, or make yourself a clutch holder. Different ways of doing things. As far as that goes, that should cover clutch removal, and we'll get specifics when we get in there and I take this off, and you'll have access and you'll see everything there is to see inside here. These are 10 millimeter. Use a ratchet. The Phillips head there is, once you break them loose, you could use like a drill with a Phillips head attachment on there and spin them out real quick. If you wanted to do that, I've done it. Some people would call it risky, some people wouldn't, but that's the whole point of the Phillips. So, socket to break these things loose and to torque them. No cheating. Okay, I have these loose. I'll try and get you a better angle here. See, their springs are starting to come out. I went around, did it easily. Remove this, spring will come with it. Stock 97 plus YZF has long and short alternating springs. Doesn't matter where you start as long as it alternates, so you could do short, long, short, long, short, long, or long, short, long. You know, whatever order you want as long as they alternate around. 95, 96s all have long springs, quote unquote long springs. Stock, I have an EBC clutch kit, so regardless of the year, if you have the EBC, they're all the same length springs, and they can go back in any order. You really don't have to worry about it. So, pull them out. And I'm going to bag these so I don't lose them, and we'll be right back. Alright, this plate, people are worried about, and certainly you should be concerned about, because if you get it wrong, you'll break it. And the plate, I want to say, is 40 something, and then the basket, the inner basket with the posts, somewhere around 80, and I've broken one of each before, and it sucks. So, to be safe, take your Sharpie, pick any one you want to pick, mark it, and then color in the post. Just color it all the way in. And this will come off too with some WD-40 if you want it to later on, but just mark it, and then if you pull this plate off, just give it a little wiggle. Sometimes these plates stick behind it. There we go. I pull this off. There's the post. This is the top hat right here. That's black. This is black. As long as I put those two back together, it can never be indexed wrong. And make sure you kind of shimmy it in there so it notches up. You can't tell in this video those pictures I posted beforehand, but if you go off on this, it just won't feel right. Some will feel close, and those are the tricky ones, because then you know, it seems like it might be right, but it isn't. But this way, it's definitely, obviously not right. But as long as you line those back up again, black, black, perfect. Never any issues. So think ahead before you do it, and life will be a lot easier. Removing the outer pressure plate now. This would be like the inner basket with the posts right here. And this is the main nut you release. We got to get that off before we can pull this off. This top hat has an O-ring on it, and it just pulls out. Behind this is the infamous little ball bearing I talk about. The push rod, which the clutch pushes on the opposite side, pushes against a roller ball bearing just to make the operation more smoother against the top hat. So be wary of that. Take your magnet, put the magnet at the end here, and then push the push rod from the other side, and that'll drive the ball forward. And then this is the ball bearing you don't want to lose. Make sure you bag it, or you have to buy a new one. And then I will take out the push rod from the opposite side because it's dirty, so I don't want to push it all the way through. And it just slides out. There's nothing holding it in. It's just this rod with this end. It's gunky because it's underneath the front sprocket cover, and I haven't really cleaned this up yet. So I pulled that through the other side, and I'm going to bag the top hat and the ball bearing, and I won't lose it. This nut, clutch basket nut, is 27 millimeter. You wouldn't need a deep well, but you get away with it. There's a lock washer there. You don't want to bend the tabs up. Most of the time I get away with not bending the tabs and just using this. I'm going to use the impact wrench because it's easier. I'm not even going to bother filming it because I got it with the camera. And I'm just going to zip this nut off. Otherwise you're going to have to come up with one way to hold it. This is, I want to say 52 foot-pounds. Don't quote me. I'll give you torque specs when I put the thing back together. So it's on there pretty tight, so you might need somebody to hold it or whatever if you don't have impact tools. Okay, it was just a quick hit with the impact to loosen it up. I'll spin it off the rest of the way by hand. This removes here, and then this tabbed washer we removed too. I'm just going to pull it out as a unit. Grab onto the posts here and wiggle, and you'll take the plates with it as well. Everything will come off. There is a big old washer on the back side. Flip this around carefully. Most of the time it gets stuck to it, and that's fine, but make sure you take this with it. It's big. Notice the way it goes. The slash marks are to the back. Sorry, it doesn't matter. Slash marks are either way. Still, keep it in the orientation it was. Plates, it does not matter. Does not matter if you end up accidentally spinning these things. It's fine, whatever. You can just leave them on. If you're replacing your clutch, you take these off. And there's steels. This is a fiber plate. The back stuck to it just with oil is a steel plate. It would come off as well. Steel plates teeth up on the inner, fiber plates teeth up on the outer. And then they spin together and lock up and what have you. You can deglaze them, make people rub some really fine sandpaper around them. You get new clutch, a lot of people pre-soak them in oil if you want to do that. But these are the studs, the posts that break a lot, either on that or the pressure plate breaks, so careful of that. Keep it bagged together. You can just keep it as an assembly if you're doing your second gear, what have you, and leave it be. I'm going to bag it. Now, the inner basket has this gear, and the case hits this gear, so you can't just straight out pull it out. What you do, there is a procedure to use 2 bolts down in here with a puller. There's a hole here, and then a hole here. Service manual gives them, I think they're an M6 something bolt, and you would bolt up there and then you draw it out that way. But if you just pull this out and wiggle it, and then kind of just wiggle it back, you will make the bearing expose itself, and then you can pull the bearing out yourself. You just do that a couple times. Use that magnet. Wiggle that. Take this out. This would be the inner part. Bearing is still attached here, so keep this someplace clean. This is all clean plastic. And if you do this and go at an angle, be mindful of the bearing surface in here. You can push the bearing out the rest of the way if you wanted. And now that's free, and I'm going to put this part back inside there. And there's also this washer plate back here. Keep this together, maintain its orientation with the other components. And now I'm going to bag this. Try and give you a better view of what's inside here. I'll zoom in and come down. So this right here is the shift shaft assembly, and right now once you have the clutch off you can just pull this out, and this is the star gear it turns. This is the detent. Mine keeps jamming up on me in gear. I can't shift. I don't know if this tab's bent or not. I don't know if I'll have to replace this shaft. The shaft is only 800 miles on it, and it's like my 3rd shaft. So on the other side is a nylon sleeve. Just slide that off the opposite side of the shaft. It's where the shift linkage attaches. Here is that thing. Pretty dirty, didn't clean it up much over there. And then there's also an oil seal on the other side as well. So when you pull this through, be aware of that so you don't nick the seal with the splines. Let me just slide it through quick. It's really not such a big deal. Just go gingerly. Wipe off the shaft on the opposite side before you pull it through, and just slide it off. Here is a removed shift shaft. Okay. So this PRA hooks up with the star gear, and this goes off the pivot point here, and this tab here is the tab that gets bent. This one is too close to tell, honestly. I'd have to compare it to some of my bad ones. It's pretty close to straight, but not quite straight. Some people try to bend it. If you're going to bend it, you definitely got to add heat, otherwise they crack right away. There's not too much wear on this. I'm hoping I might be able to reuse it. if you decide to reuse it and you have issues later on, it's not such a big deal to pull the clutch cover off and the clutch off with the bike in the motor. The motor in the bike if you're having issues later on, because this is $50, I want to say. Online prices, retail I think is somewhere in the 70s. So once that's out, you got more access to other things. I'm going to put this aside. And we'll look in here a little deeper at what would be required for a shift kit install. You know, it's a pain in the butt. People do it without removing the clutch, and there's a nice how-to on how to do it, and it certainly is a nice how-to. I think it's easier to take the clutch off because the clutch is not that difficult to take off. That's the star gear. This is the detent arm. Let me point with this. This is the detent arm. Mine has bearings on it because I've done it. And then the spring is this spring here. And then this is the bolt that retains it underneath the oil pump. Let me get you a better angle. That's better. So this and this and this. Star cam here. Right now my bike is in neutral because it's on this hump. And this is part of the shift drum assembly, which we'll see later on when we pull this stuff out to get to it. Oil pans underneath here. There's a strainer here. This is an oil pump drive gear. It can spin. You could play with it if you want. No big deal. That'll have to come off, and then this comes off, and this comes off. But say you just want to do a shift kit. Once you have this off, you can pull this gear off without much issue. There's a bolt here and a bolt here. There's 3 bolts. You line them up with the whole 5mm cap screws. Take that off, and this will come off. You have unrestricted access. When I did mine, I left the oil pump gear on, but I did take the clutch off. I take that back. First one on mine, I used the how-to and was a pain in the ass with the zip tie and everything. On my buddy's bike, I did it with taking the clutch off and was so much happier I took the clutch off. Because this spring can suck. You still want to use the zip tie method to help you keep it compressed and get it all together. But it's nice to have the extra clearance and to get in there. So it's just this arm and this spring is your shift kit. But pulling the clutch off, cover bolts. Only tricky part is the one big nut, which there's lots of ways around that, as I've said already. Slide it off, keep it as an assembly, mark the pressure plate so it can go back the way it was. It's really only like a 20-minute job to get all that stuff off. And if the bike is not side stand, you won't lose any oil. And then slide the shift shaft out, and then you have access to this, exactly where we are right now. And it's very accessible. I'm about to remove the last bolt holding the oil pump drive gear on. So pull this off and then just wiggle this assembly. Take it off. There's a gasket behind there as well. And a dowel pin. And everything came off in one piece. May or may not reuse it. It is. Not entirely sure honestly what this gasket's made out of. Sorry to not know. I'm going to put the bolts with it, and I will bag it, and there is what is remaining when you take the oil pump drive shaft off. Starting to question the manual, they want me to remove the detent arm and these retaining plates here. Behind these plates are the shafts that hold the shift forks in line. There's 2 shafts, and there's 2 shift forks on one shaft, 1 shift fork on the other shaft. It's all below the case split line though, and I wonder if it wouldn't be easier to leave this assembled so things aren't falling out when I'm starting to flip it around until I'm ready to actually split the cases. This is the seam here in the middle. Case splits there. Nothing should fall out once these are out, but it just might be a hassle of things being loose around there, and I don't see why it would hurt. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'll find out later on. So right now I think I'm done from in there. What is left is I gotta flip it and take off the oil pan, and then I can take off the oil pickup tube at the same time, and I will start cracking loose case bolts. I believe would be the next step. There's a couple underneath inside the oil pan area, and then the 2 hidden ones. So that's what makes this more troublesome than it could be, because the rest of the bolts are pretty easily accessible. You got to do it in the order they do it. And I think my ultimate plan will be to get everything loosened, and then I'm going to take the ones at the bottom in the oil pan area out all the way first, and then reposition it sitting back this way again, and then get the rest of the bolts there, because I want to take the top half off and leave everything else sitting in the bottom. Some people might want to do it the other way. Maybe I'll end up changing my mind, have put the halves together and flip it. But I think it might be a little easier orientation for me to deal with it that way. This is one of the transmission shafts. bearings here, and it's turning the cog on this one here. So hopefully this would just separate and this would rest here, and that should be the plan, because then I can work on the upper case half, separate it all by itself, try and repair that crack in the case there. And we'll see what I can do with that. Hopefully that'll work out. I'm flirting with the idea of maybe trying to buy a used case. Kind of hard to come by, plus shipping sucks, and I'm hopeful. I had the JB weld in there for years, and that was working fine. I could always redo that too and do it better. Now I got more accessibility. The thing I'm thinking of using is, like I say, HTS 2000. It's an aluminum brazing rod. I've had some luck with it with other projects, but that's a large area to fill, and we'll see how it goes. Now I'm going to go inside and eat something because I'm very hungry, and then I'm going to clean up my table and organize my parts and go from there, because I'll be splitting the case and I'm going to want all the room I got here and just keep things more tidy. Maybe change out the plastic, see how it goes, and do my best to keep everything clean and together and organized. Change of plans. There's a few more things I got to take off beforehand I forgot about. So I'm going to spin it around and take off the water pump and the output shaft seal cover. I don't think you actually have to remove the whole cover. You got to remove mounting bolts here. It goes into the casing there. And then lower one here goes into the casing there. And then it's just an O-ring holding the pump together, and you can pull it out. If you have a leak coming out from the bottom here, there's a weep hole. Usually if the water pump is bad, there's a mechanical seal there. The only gasket is between the cover and the pump itself. Anything that's coming from inside the pump on the back side has got to be a mechanical problem of the seal itself, where it's pressed and you have to replace it. And I replaced a water pump on a 97 one time. It was pretty straightforward to do, no big deal there. This is the other drain port right here. So you have your 3 drains, your 2 on the front of the water jacket, and then the one at the water pump if you're draining your coolant system. 5mm cap head screw. Okay, and you just grab on and wiggle. Wiggle its way out. Water pump. This is what splines up and drives the pump itself. This is the O-ring. It's in good shape. Reuse. Bad, replace. A little coolant left in there still, as always. And that's all there is for removing a water pump. On the output shaft, that's where the front sprocket would go. There's a retainer ring here, bolted there. Got to take this retainer off, and then we can pull the rubber seal off, which the manual specifies we should do. We could also pull out, this is where the push rod seal is this one. And then if we zoom back out, down here is the shift shaft seal. For risk of damaging the seal, or fearing of damaging the seal, I'm going to leave it here. You have to take the bracket out because it holds this half of the case to this half of the case, but sometimes people have leaks in this area, and when they're talking about replacing the seal, that's what there is. You remove this retainer bracket assembly, 2 bolts, 5mm cap, and then you would take a pick, and you would get in on the side of the seal or a small screwdriver, and you'd leverage the seal out and work its way around, and then you'd press in the new seal. You'll probably damage the old seal, so because mine's good, I'm not going to rip it out with the pick. But if yours was already bad, you rip it out this way and then put it back on, so it's not too tough to have to replace that seal. This is the neutral indicator. You gotta take this plate off. It's 2 Phillips screws. You need like a number 3 Phillips driver. Sometimes it can be tricky. Behind that is just on the end of the shift drum assembly is a little lobe, a brass knob, and corresponds with this wire here. And when it's in neutral, they line up and it completes the circuit and lights up the neutral light. So I'm just going to remove these 2 screws and pull it out. Okay, I have removed it. And it comes off there. You can see that there's a little electrode probe right in here. This is the little brass nub. And that's how your neutral light works. Now the motor's on its back. This would be where the front pistons would be. Oil filter would go here. This is the oil pan I'm going to remove next. This is the low level oil light here. It's 2 8mm standard bolts. Take that off, pull it out. Then I can remove the last of the electrical wires that are still attached to the engine. And then I will remove these 5mm cap bolts for the oil pan, loosen them up, quarter turn, until they're all loose, doing a crisscross pattern going around the bend. There is a specific torquing sequence. Be aware of that when you're putting it back together. Okay, bolts are removed. I'm just going to have to give it a little wiggle or a pry to get it out. There it goes. That's all that is. It's a circuit that is open when there's oil in there and closed when oil is not in there. It reaches a lower level, it triggers the circuit. I might have that backwards, I'm sorry. Anyway, oil level gets below a certain point, it senses it and just turns on the light. Alright, make sure you have all your bolts out. Double check so you don't get any hung up. Should come off pretty easily. And then maybe you need a couple light taps with your plastic or rubber mallet just around the perimeter. Cemented over here, I can feel it, but it seems to be. And look at that, I forgot one bolt. And I didn't do that as a demo either, but you gotta be aware, if it's not coming off easy, there's probably a bolt hung up on there somewhere. Put that over here, in order. And now, the gasket's stuck in one place here. I might be able to save it. Tore. You never know, you might be able to save it, but most likely you won't be able to do that. You want to check in here for shavings, what have you. This is the strainer. This section here would be under the clutch basket area, so if you drop something, it should get caught in here and not be able to go down into the sump area to actually be tried to be picked up by the pump. It's a pickup tube there. These gaskets are kind of spendy, but just part of the process. Alright, this is the relief valve mechanism up here. This is the strainer. Above it is the relief valve. It's supposed to remove that and it's supposed to be good so you're not resting on it. You just give it a wiggle, pulls right out. O-ring on there. No problem for that. Nothing else back in there to worry about. Good to go, bag it. Strainer to get off. You gotta take the cover off and then there's bolts in there to get at, apparently. We'll see. Recording. Okay. This cover just pressure clamps on. It's got some indents around their side. It's been peened on. To get it off, I tried using some hooks to leverage it off, and it just didn't go. What worked for me, I took the long screwdriver and tried here on the edge of it, a little bit that way, and then through this opening at the bottom came down. Some very light taps. Didn't take much effort. Tap, tap, and it popped off. That exposes the two 5mm cap bolts in there to take this off to get the clearance you need when you're maneuvering this around. Judging from the smell of it and the looks of it, it looks like there might be some hardened RTV or some type of thread sealant on these bolts. Be aware of that when you put it back together. The shop manual, of course, will tell you what it is and where to put it. I'm going to remove all the case bolts, starting at the highest number, which is 35. It's in the back corner on the top. Highest number to little number, breaking them loose, quarter turn until they're all loose. I believe it's bolt 19 that they designate is missing, meaning there is no 19 underneath here. I'll confirm that once I get into it. And also, I believe they skipped the number 20 in their numbering system, because they go from 21 on the top and then jump to the 19 as the highest on the lower half. And where it designates to be a 19, there's no possible way for a bolt to be there, but we'll confirm. I know this part very well where all the bolts are, so I'm just going to trust you have a service manual, follow the pictures. The numbers are embossed. These bolts here are essentially the main cap bolts. These are bolts numbers 1 through 8, I believe. Excuse me, 1 through 11. 11 is an odd number, it can't be 11. Yeah, 1 through 12. 12, these are essentially the main cap bolts here, 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 and this is the bottom of the motor where the oil pan will be going up. They're kind of a long, screwy looking little thing. There's a washer Don't forget that. Don't lose it. Be aware that there's going to be a washer there. Break everything loose first. That's what I've done, and I'm backing out all the bottom stuff first. Put it back on top, and then back out all the top stuff. I did not find a 19. Did not find a 20. We'll see if the case is split. It would be smart, if not tedious, although tedious, to label your bolts. Put them on some cardboard, some numbers with some holes in there. I'm putting them on a notebook and then taping them to the notebook. Show you what I mean when I'm done getting the page. Just so you can be certain you're putting them back where they need to be. Technically, they wouldn't have to go back to the exact same spot as long as you got the right bolts in the right place, but there are varying sizes of bolts. This is what I've been doing with my bolts. I just wrote down a piece of notebook paper, labeled them, taped them. I'll rip this sheet out. Not saying you can go fling it around in the world, but it'll keep it together. Take this sheet off, put it aside, and have another sheet, and continue on, so I know where everything was. Cardboard would be stronger with the holes, but I think it's more work to put all the holes in the cardboard. Do whatever you want as long as you keep them where they need to be. Okay, taking all the bolts out right now. I just noticed something on 25. I was going to note there's made a squishing sound, which I don't know if you'll be able to hear. But there's definitely something underneath there to be aware of. I don't know it yet. I can look it up. So just be aware of that. Not quite sure what's going on with mine. Definitely an oil squashing kind of sound, and it feels kind of soft as well. But it is also threaded at the same time, so it's an odd feeling. We'll see what happens when we get... Okay, let me take the time to show you bolt 19. You go up through this hole here. And in here is bolt 19. If you look in here, there's a big arrow pointing to it right here. This is it there. Up through there and there. Definitely bolt 19. Didn't find a bolt 20. Okay, I have moved all the bolts, tapped wire on the case, seems to have cracked loose. I'm now going to lift the upper case off the bottom case. There will be bearings, and they may fall for the mains on the crank. There's a circlip for the transmission stuff as well that may fall as well. You guys got to be aware of where it came from and put it back, and don't forget about it. So I'm just going to record this and see what happens as we go. I'll try and move the camera to another angle so that you may perhaps see what it is that I'm doing better. And I'll just wiggle in the case. And something feels connected. I think it's that hose from the bottom. Connected to the crankcase fender. Yep. And be mindful of the chain here. Get me twisted up. Okay. And pull this through. Cases are split. I got the trans opened up. These are the stacks of gears. These are the pinion gears. Goodness, now I'm getting all screwed up. This one sits here. And this is where the clutch basket would link up, was with this one. It's all the pinions. This other shaft goes this way. And this is where the actual gears that you'd be replacing are. They just lift out. If they're a little stuck, a couple light taps with a plastic hammer and just kind of get them loose. They might just be bound up. There's a circlip on these things. Be aware of that. And then there's circlip on this negative. Circlip in this half here, which is where this rides. Don't forget there's a circlip there. And then there's a circlip on this big wheel here. And then the circlip on this big wheel here. They got to be in there when you put them back on. This one also has an indexing dot, which would line up within here. Index. And that big one would be over here. Okay. I've already taken off these two outer wheels and gears. This would be an example of like what an okay dog would look like. Nothing fancy about that. And I'm just laying them out in order. The next gear is held on with a snap ring. So you need a snap ring plier. Like so. And then you expand the ring and slide it off. And then you can get this gear off as well. And I'm going to continue to get these off, and then I'll show you once it's all apart. I've removed that circlip and taken this apart. This would be this way. Okay, this is where the shift fork would travel, is on this one here. And If you look here, not too worn on this side, of course. This is the side that meshes with 6th gear. You can see how it's worn down here. Certainly, you know, been rubbed a good bit. And here, it's not as bad as some. It's certainly not as good as new. So that's 2nd gear wheel right here. And that would mesh into this way. Onto the 6th gear would slide that way. 6th gear is held on with another clip. I haven't removed it yet. I'm looking at this, and this looks actually very good shape. So good that I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to replace it. Because there's really not much wear in here at all along the face of this. So I'm not sure. Money saves, money saved, of course. We shall see. Shift fork. This would be here. This is where the big bearing is, and it rests in here with this circlip in this groove, and this circlip rests in that groove. This would sit here. So this is the shift fork that would move 2nd gear in and out. It's certainly worn out. I replaced this once before, previously, and I will replace this one again. The others, I'll get some better light in here if I can. The others don't appear so bad. A little rubbing here and there, but really not much to report. So much and so I think I will probably leave them and give it a go without it, and we'll see what happens. So that's where I stand right now. I don't have any parts ordered. I took this all apart to see what parts I needed. I'm going to take out the shift drum, and we'll see how that looks. That's always such a crapshoot if it looks bad or not, whether you should replace it or not. I'm of the mindset mine probably won't look all that bad, but we'll find out once I pull it out. In hindsight, certainly wouldn't have to take off the starter clutch if you didn't want to. It certainly makes things lighter. Obviously I left the big stator rotor on. That would make things quite a bit lighter if I took that off. I guess I just took that off for fun, because it really doesn't matter. Now we're going to try and get in here, and we'll take out the components which hold the shift drum assembly in, which is the brackets here and the detent arm, and then this forks can lift out because these brackets cover the rods, and then the rods slide out, and then you can lift the fork straight up, and then this drum will pull straight out as well. So I'm going to loosen this, this, and this. To remove the last bolt, which is this one right here, it's actually a longer shaft. You'll need a deep 12mm socket. You might be able to try and get a box or an open end on there. It's going to suck though, but you definitely need a deep, as this shaft is part of the bolt. You'll see once it's out, but a deep weld 12mm. This bracket is now free. Pull the retainer off and the bolt, and then I'm going to bag them so I don't lose them. And since you have the top open, we can work from the top. We're going to slide the shaft forward here. And we're going to pull it. And then the shift fork is free, and the shaft. The shift forks are numbered, or lettered, and the book tells you which way to put them with which way the letters should go, so you don't need to worry about that right now too much as far as orientation. We got another one to go here. And magnets can sometimes help, or just jimmy it, slide it off. And here is shift fork R and shift fork L. L is the one that goes against 2nd gear. You can see how mine is chewed up. Most of the time, when these get bad, you see the shine here, it'll be more worn on the pad here, but I've always noticed it's here that mine get ground up. And I'm not entirely sure, but because it's grinding funny, I suppose I should replace the drum just to be sure, because that certainly wouldn't be caused by much else in an oddly positioned drum. Because this fork was replaced 2,000 miles ago. I went through the bottom, went through the oil pan just to replace the shift fork. And removing those. Now, drum here, you can push it through the other side. There's a bearing. And here is this assembly. I'll zoom out and get a better look here. So this is the neutral sensor nub. It would go against that electrical circuit. This track here is what will move the L shift fork, which is second gear. The part is sixth gear. You just got to look in the tracks here to see if it's worn, overly worn. Mine looks really, really clean. I mean, not even a scuff mark on any of these things. So it's so hard for me to want to have to replace it when it's, I want to say $86 for this part. But I probably should because you're in here anyway. Most people feel this is usually the debated part, whether you replace it or not. It's hard, very difficult to determine one way or the other. So, this is what the shift drum looks like, and here's the star. This flat spot detent would be neutral, and then it would rotate around through the gears. Honestly, can't remember the rotation. I think it actually probably goes like this for 1 and then 2, 3, 4. I think. Doesn't matter. Don't quote me. So that's that removed. Now the case is pretty much gutted. The forks are out. I mean, the transmission shaft is taken apart. See how mine's worn, but not as worn as I was thinking it was going to be. But certainly my dogs are worn on the second gear part. But that face of sixth gear looks really freaking good. So it's hard to say. So this one's rotate this way, and then it hits and then rides up. For me, my second gear was never popping out a load, which is why I thought I could get by with just the fork replacement, but I kept eating shift rods. The tap would bend and I get stuck. And certainly it got notchy between 1 and 2. So, after the last one, I replaced shift fork through the belly, thinking that might just get me by. Give it a go. Did the shift rod and the shift shaft again. That was like my third shift shaft. And, well, it didn't work. I kept getting stuck in gear again now. The shift shaft's not as bad as it once was. That tab could probably be used, but I might as well just swap it. So it was so bad to the point I was like, I'm not going to put any more band-aids on it. I'm going to pull it all the way apart and see what there all really needs to be replaced inside this. And that's where we stand right now.